Hello, everybody, and welcome to SIG Scheduling weekly meeting. As you know, this meeting is recorded and will be uploaded to public internet. So chances are whatever you say will remain there for a very long time. With that, let's start the meeting and take a quick look at the agenda. I actually wanted to give a quick update on Code Freeze 116, which is coming only in a couple of days or so. And I believe, at least according to our plan and the spreadsheet that we have, pretty much all the major items are done and already PRs merged. Among those are the scheduling framework. We've built all the extension points. PRs are merged. I know that there are a couple of other PRs to improve things, but as far as I can tell, with respect to the main work items, everything is done for implementing the extension points. There is even pod spreading that Wei was working on, and all those PRs are merged. We are ready for code freeze. There were some other items, including resource quota. I guess that one is not there as much as we wanted to. That is pending for some other reviews, as we discussed last week. Sudesh's resource bin packing is done. Sudesh, you are in the meeting. Let us know if my understanding is incorrect.
Yeah, the code is merged right now, at least, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your help.
Yeah, no problem.
And what else? So, yeah, there were a few items that we went over last week. I don't want to go through those again. We know that some of them are not going to make it for some other reasons. For example, we decided to not move component config to V1 beta 1 because there is another major work to make all the fields optional. That's going to happen outside of our SIG, and we're waiting for that to happen before moving our component config to beta. And other things which I think we don't need to repeat unless there is some new update on them this week. If anybody has any updates, please share them with us.
So basically, I have one question on our fields change on our internal scheduling API. So right now we are at V1 Alpha 1. So does that mean we can arbitrarily change the fields to support new feature? For example, the Sudash is I think Sudash, that feature needs some API change, right? As well as some ongoing items like the drivenness, what's that item? Configurable, the max backup duration or some kind of like this. So yeah. I think we lack of clear guideline or procedure about how we manage our internal API compatibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if we want to go by only the guidelines provided by the whole Kubernetes repository, we can change alpha versions anytime we want, in any ways we want. The problem is that for some time, at least in the past couple of releases, component config, which is in alpha, has been the only recommended way of providing config to the scheduler. The other flags were marked as deprecated. In these cases, I don't think we can really go by those recommendations that we can change alpha fields or alpha features in any ways we want, because since this has been the only way that users could provide a config, chances are a lot of users are using them. As a result, we should be more careful and we should be considerate. If we want to change these things, we should announce them and let users know. At the same time, if we just want to stick with the guidelines, you're right. We can change these alpha version API in any way we want.
Yes. Yeah, makes sense. It's like that, this kind of change, like Sudash one and the Germanist one is embedded policy config API, right? Inside the component, the scheduler component config API. So that is the API in API. So it's a little like we add a new fields or change a fields in the v1.pod spec. Then we have another alpha beta GA control on that specific feature. Yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, something similar to that exists for other Kubernetes API as well. If you're referring to, for example, I mean, we have had alpha fields in V1 Kubernetes API, for example. I think this is kind of similar, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Barry. Is there any other updates? I know we have other items on the agenda, but I just wanted to make sure that with respect to the code freeze that is coming for 1.16, we are all set. Is there any urgent PR that needs a review in the next couple of days?
We have a bug in the way that we call filters, run, like, running the filters. Right now, they're not being run in the preemption path. So it's already being reviewed, waiting for the person to actually respond. I don't know if we will get it before, but I don't think it's a major issue because we don't have any plugins unless.
Right. I mean, you're right. So basically, the code is reviewed. The author hasn't responded.
Well, he's responding, but it's just like I mean, we provided more feedback, and then it's tight, right?
Yeah. So maybe we can reach out to them on Slack if they are available in Slack, and ask them to fix things more quickly. That's not, I wouldn't call it like a necessary item for 1.16, but it'll be much better if we can add it to 1.16 in case some other users try to add filters. Probably we want preemption to work correctly, right?
Yeah, we might ask for an exception for that one.
Yeah, and then that one is kind of a bug fix, I would say.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's an incorrect logic. If we don't do it in preemption, it's considered incorrect logic. So for bug fixes, we can add them after code freeze as well.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
We don't need an exception.
No, for bug fixes, I don't think we need an exception.
That's what I was telling you. We don't need an exception for that.
Yeah. All right. So Abdullah, I know that you have added a few items to the agenda. Do you want to tell us more about them, and we can discuss them?
So the first one is, I noticed that we have a flag that indicates whether or not we run all the predicates when a predicate fails. So basically, the flag says whether to continue running the predicates if a predicate fails, or like returns that the node should be filtered. We don't have that in the framework for the filters. So I was wondering, was this by design or not? Whether we should actually add that feature to the framework. If not, should we deprecate this? So I just want to
Yeah, actually, since the scheduler was running all the predicates, no matter the previous one had failed or not, we decided to add a flag when we started not executing any more predicates after one fails. we decided to add a flag, but the value of the flag by default was false, by basically not running any more predicates after one phase. And I haven't heard any single person complaining about the fact that this flag is false and it does not run other predicates. I highly doubt if people really rely on that behavior. It's internal behavior of the scheduler anyway. It's not a part of scheduler's API really.
Flag though, it's in the it's one of the configurations for the scheduler.
I mean, I was not necessarily the flag. I mean the behavior that how many of these predicates are executed and how they are executed. And the order can be specified, but otherwise, if it's not specified, people cannot really rely on the order of these predicates. This is considered as internal logic of the scheduler. So for filters and for the scheduling framework, I would honestly say that let's drop it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just wondering about the process of deprecating this behavior, because for externally for users, even filters, it's an internal issue. Like the way that, for example, we're moving predicates into filters. To external users of the scheduler, it's still basically a bunch of predicates are being run. So we're basically breaking that. And I know that this is an internal feature, but we're exposing it as a flag to whoever's using the scheduler. So my recommendation is to actually completely deprecate the flag before we get into inconsistent behavior when we start moving predicates into filters.
So I agree with you. I think now that we haven't hit the code freeze yet, it's actually a good time to mark that flag as deprecated so that we can drop it sooner. And then when the scheduling framework, I mean, we're adding default filters for the scheduling framework in the next cycle, we can basically forget about this particular behavior.
You mean like before this code freeze, today's code freeze?
Yes, before this code freeze, we can just mark that flag as deprecated. It's as simple as just putting a comment there and saying that it's deprecated.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I do not know any users who are actually using that. I think we kind of approved that because we want to have that short circuit evaluation of, instead of doing for all the predicates, let short circuit if one of the predicate fails. But I think it would be better to send out an email to SIG scheduling mailing list or Kubernetes dev to like get some feedback before we get started on deprecation.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea either. So the problem is that time is pretty tight. I'm not so sure if we will get enough feedback before we can.
Yeah, we can send out an email and we can tell that in the next 48 hours or so, if we do not receive this PR will be approved and this feature will be deprecated.
We don't even have 48 hours though.
So when is code freeze? My impression was that it's Monday, isn't it?
I thought it's today.
I think it's today.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit of a
Oh, I was thinking it's Monday too. I'm sorry.
I checked today and I read that it was today. And the release managers are already holding PRs because the queue is full.
Okay, so you're practically out of time. All right, then maybe we can do it for the next cycle.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. It's just something to discuss.
Okay.
So the other one is I really understand like the scheduler API package and the way that we version things there, and what like it's along the same lines of Way's comment as well a few minutes ago. We have this problem where the types.go that's under API for some of its fields, they have a different type, like unsigned integer 32, compared to the one that exists under v1, like, API-v1/types.go. I want to understand what those two types.go files mean, and how do we usually change them? Do we always change them together? It's just like I don't understand why we have to, and how do we promote something to v1, and when should we have v2, for example?
Well, I don't think we have ever had v2 anywhere in Kubernetes code base yet. But promotion from like alpha to beta to GA is what has happened very commonly for various APIs, and I think you may have already been familiar with that. So once the API becomes more stable, we usually graduate it from v1 to beta 1, and we can have other criteria for graduation, and these are usually specified in the KEPs for various features of Kubernetes. And then once all the criteria are met, we have all the features and all the bells and whistles for some feature in, then we can, and we have confidence for stability, we can move it to GA. Of course, each one of them has different guarantees for backward compatibility as well. So some of like alpha, we don't provide any backward compatibility. For beta, we provide like 6 months. For GA, we provide, I think, a year after deprecation. So
so for now, then API/types.go should always be the same as API-v1/types.go.
I believe so, yes. So usually what is in types reflects the most recent version of the API. So basically, if most recent version is v1, types.go in v1 should be the same as types.go in /APIs.
I haven't read like completely the schedule code that reads that part, but are we like, I don't know, hypothetically, if we have v2 in the future, we're supposed to support both v1 and v2. Do you know how those like?
I don't know really. That's something, as I said, has never happened anywhere in Kubernetes code base. But my impression is that once we go from v1 to v2, at some point we will drop v1 support. But when, I don't know really.
And what is the recommendation that people should import? Like which one should they import? Should they import API/types.go or v1/types.go?
Version, usually we import versioned API.
Versioned API. Okay.
Yes.
So then what's the purpose of API/types.go? So
I actually don't know exactly what all these files, how these files are used. Some of them are there for code generation purposes. I know that we have some scripts that generates code, but I don't know exactly. And some of them are there for historical reasons. But anyway, I don't actually know why exactly we have like 2 versions.
So I know quite a few knowledge on this, but maybe I'm wrong. I just provide my 2 cents. So basically, in the old days of Kubernetes, we have non-version types.go, which is aimed to be used internally, for example, in our Golang source code. And also there are some versioned types.go. So internally we have an unversioned. So basically we have some conversion methods to transfer from them between each other. So basically, so we have the unversioned object to convert to the v1 alpha 1 or to v1 alpha 2 or some other versions like that. But in 1.14, I think this kind of mechanism has been deprecated because of extra efforts manage the conversion or sort of that. So this is basically my knowledge on this. But you can refer to STDTS, Stefan Shemansky. He's the boss of.
Okay. Yeah, I know the guy. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I just know quite a little on this.
Yeah, those
Yes.
are all managed by SIG API machinery. Those folks should know all the details.
No, it's just this holding a cleanup because we're using policy somewhere.
No, but I think the conclusion is they should be consistent, so we should fix that. They are right now, for some field types, they are not consistent, so we should make them consistent. And that's what would fix the parsing.
Yes.
Okay. I assume favoring the size numbers, right? The size units, like int32.
So there was an older issue where they advocated the use of an exact size types, like instead of using int, you have to use int32 in APIs.
Yes.
But we have not been consistent with that. So there are some fields that use int, some fields are using int32, etc. in our types that go for the field. So I think this is a.
I think some of them existed. Maybe again before we decided to enforce this requirement.
Okay, so then we will open a new bug and work on that first, and then call the cleanup until that is fixed.
If no one else has any more comments, one last item that I have in mind is about also related to that API file and the fields that we define there, especially the constants. I worry that sometimes we define constants there just because it's the most higher level file that you can use across the code in our code, but it's not shouldn't actually be exposed as an API. And one of them that I saw is the max priority constant. And the reason I looked at it is because we were discussing moving into 0 to 100 range for priorities and scores rather than 0 to 10. And I thought that we could just basically change max priority from 10 to 100 and just be done with it. But I'm concerned about who's using that field. I mean, at the end of the day, the contract between us and whoever is using it is just the variable name, not the value, I think. But it's still, we need to be cautious about changing it.
So I guess for that field, that particular constant there could be a kind of a valid reason. I suspect some of our extenders may actually use that to report their score back to the scheduler. So maybe that's why it's there.
Yeah, I didn't read that code path, but if we expect them to report the specific range, then they have to report the new range. If we're expecting that the range will change from 0 to 10 to 0 to 100.
Correct. There are two approaches, I guess, to the problem. One is to change that constant and expect them to not use the actual value, but use the constant. So if they recompile, everything will be fine. That's one thing. The second could be, we could convert it.
Which is like, kind of hacky, and I feel it's not the right approach. But it's the right approach shorter term so that we make the transition. But I don't want to keep that code inside our scheduler where it's inconsistent what each one is providing and they were trying to converge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think given that these extenders, especially for priority functions, are not very widely used, I would just try to announce the changes and make the necessary changes.
Okay, yeah. I'll take a closer look also at what we are expecting from the extenders when we call them for this type of for scoring or priority.
Yeah.
I think there's some validation code around that to ensure that the scores are not crossing the max priority value for individual nodes.
Right,
Yeah.
but that is internal to us, right? Like it's after we receive the response from them.
Correct.
Yeah, but they are still expected to return the number in that range. So they may be using that max priority in their code base to return a number which. All right. Is there any other question or comments?
One thing I would like to bring to discussion is, do we want to have any delay between like subsequent schedulings? Like say if there is a pod that has failed, can we, like as of now, I think we have something for the preemption, but do we want to have a retry mechanism that is to ensure that the pod that is failing continuously is not being retried, like a timeout kind of thing?
Yeah, we already have that. We already have a backup mechanism for pods.
That's like, when are we going to stop? Like I'm seeing some of the pods are say in like big clusters, they're being tried, but still it is being retried even after like the backup thing.
Well, the scheduler is not supposed to stop. We don't want to stop trying. Why should we stop?
So I'm wondering if there is a way to tell, okay, this has failed for n number of times, let's not schedule it, and send notification saying that this will not be scheduled again.
I think that would, like for example, assume you have cluster autoscaler running in the same cluster.
Yeah.
And you don't want to stop doing that because maybe the cluster autoscaler reacted slowly to add more nodes, and then the pod would become schedulable after that, right?
By the time a node will be added, right?
Sorry?
I'm sorry, by the time a node will be added, right? And the pod would...
Yeah, maybe like whatever you heuristic we added into the scheduler, maybe it reacted faster than the cluster autoscaler and decided that we shouldn't try again, even though the cluster autoscaler added more nodes later.
Yeah, I don't think we should ever stop retrying.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, as Abdullah said, there could be some changes in the cluster that come after a long number of hours. For example, I don't know, you're running a huge job in the cluster which has thousands of pods, and the job takes several hours to finish, but after it finishes, suddenly it releases a lot of resources in your cluster. A lot of other new pods who have been waiting for a long time can now be scheduled. So things of this sort happens a lot in clusters. So I don't think it makes sense for the cluster to stop. You know, we could potentially think about some other mechanisms, like if a job has a resource requirements beyond a certain configurable limit that can, you know, we can configure in the clusters, then never try to schedule it. For example, if I go and say my pod requires 20 terabytes of RAM, the scheduler retrying and it will never succeed. So, I mean, one potential possibility is to say that, okay, and whenever you see a memory request beyond, I don't know, 500 gigabytes, then drop this pod. I mean, this is just a vague idea. In Borg, we had something similar to this, basically finding the maximum size of a node. And if a pod or if a task in Borg's terminology is larger than that max node size, then never retry. But that does not quite apply to Kubernetes, because in Kubernetes, we have a more flexible cluster. So autoscaler could potentially add some other nodes, for example, to the cluster, or some other nodes maybe added manually even to the cluster that have a different spec. In Borg, we're assuming that we're in an on-prem cluster, size of nodes are fixed and nodes are not added in. But for Kubernetes, it's slightly different. So that's why I think if we want to have a similar feature, we should probably make it configurable.
Yeah, making it configurable is fine, but I see your point too, Abdullah and Bobby. Yeah, let me think more about it, and then I'll see if there is a use case where we can send some sort of notification saying that if a new node gets added, or whose size can be fit into, or whose size can actually satisfy the pod. We can try retrain them, something like that.
Sounds good. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Right, we're officially over time. Is there any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, everybody. See you, some of you at least, next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.